From raging wildfires to record flooding, boy, we had it all in this country this past year. What a tumultuous year in weather. What a fascinating year in weather. And of course, Canadians love to talk about weather. We are so significantly impacted by the weather and mesmerized by the power of the weather. So what an opportunity we have today to talk weather for a few minutes with none other than David Phillips, Senior Climatologist with Environment Canada. Great to see you again. Nice to see you, Heather. And look who's with us, David. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Heather.
My good friend,
David.
Chris.
You'll know.
I do know him well. He's the poet laureate of meteorology. You know that.
I know that every morning.
Okay.
But Chris, stand by with me because this is a great opportunity for you to join in. And on the occasion of Environment Canada's coming out with its list of the top 10 weather stories. These are not just weather stories. These are the stories that dominate our news coverage every single day. How would you describe 2018 in weather overall?
Well, Heather, I was thinking of that in a long shower this morning, and I thought what a year it was from this point of view. I mean, we had our extremes, the fires, the floods, the droughts, and everything. But what I thought this year was different in the sense that there were two seasons missing, spring and fall. We went from slush to sweat to slush. And you know, the transition seasons are important to us because we get ready for the next extremes. You know, we put away our long johns and get out our muscle shirts and tank tops. We put away the lawn furniture in the fall and we get ready to put the snow tires on. And there was no time in between the winter and the summer. So it was telling you it was a very long summer, but it was an extraordinarily long winter and has been the coldest fall in 28 years.
Okay, so we're losing the middle ground. We are into the extremes. And Chris, it seems that we were talking about that a lot in our coverage. I mean, we're just into very significant, very severe conditions, whichever end of the spectrum you're looking at.
Yeah, the shoulder seasons are getting narrower, you might say. And certainly, let me look at April. Let's take Toronto, for example, and those lots of stories there, and David will cover them. But we went from a miserable April with the ice storm and all those winds, and then an incredible May. And that was just one example of many. So, David, I know you're going to be talking about some of the three real impactful ones.
Well, let's do this. We can't do all 10 because we want to talk in some detail about them. So we've picked David's top 3, and we're going to do them in reverse order. Number 3, David, you said was last year's prairie harvest. The hot, dry, snow made for a very tough growing season in the prairies.
You know, Heather, farmers are used to drought. I mean, it's part of the cost of doing business. But to have back-to-back droughts, and we saw, for example, in parts of southern Saskatchewan, you go back 135 years, they never had 2 drier years in a row, 2017, 2018. And it started cold, and then, as Chris said, it was like weather whiplash. You went from frozen April to, my gosh, July like in May. And say they got the seed in, but then they ran into drought problems. And not only dry conditions, unprecedented dry, but then record temperatures, very hot temperatures, and this could, and then, of course, the only good thing you can say is that, well, okay, harvest came early. The end of August, it lasted 10 days, because they went really into winter. I mean, frost is typical. I mean, it's what you expect in September, but not the dead of winter. And they had snows, I mean, record snows. In Edmonton, for example, they got 38 centimeters of snow in September. Their normal is 1 centimeter. So too cold, too snowy. You couldn't have manufactured a worse year for farmers.
Okay. Cameron McIntosh, incidentally, did some good reporting on that for us, and those stories are online if you want to revisit some of the images from all of those conditions. Number 2, the global heat wave that Canada was very much a part of, David.
Absolutely. It was really, we saw record conditions from Korea, Japan to Great Britain, from the Arctic Circle to Death Valley, and we were in between. And this was one of maybe the 3rd, 4th warmest summer on record. And Heather, you don't often see from coast to coast a heat wave and humid conditions, but we saw that in some bouts. We saw it in Ottawa on Canada Day, the 2nd warmest ever since Confederation, the highest humidity on record. We saw in Quebec 93 deaths from that incredible prolonged heat wave, and out west temperatures that were 42, 41 degrees in Calgary, the warmest moment in their entire history of 135 years. So, hey, it was clearly extreme from coast to coast.
Okay, Chris, I'm going to bring you in on this next one, too. Hold on for just a second. But the #1 weather story, as Environment Canada has named it, is the record wildfires in British Columbia, the worst in all of the years of keeping nearly 13,000 square kilometers, David, burning in the season this year.
Right, and you know, Heather and Chris, this was the #1 story last year, and it wouldn't have been this year. The problem is they had lots of fires. There was one moment where you had 480 fires burning on the province somewhere. I mean, where do you assign crews to fight those? I mean, we had 250,000 lightning hits, but it was the smoke from those fires that spread right across from coast to coast. People in Calgary, you couldn't buy a gas mask and face mask in Calgary. 480 hours of haze and smoke in Calgary. There normally would be 12 hours. I mean, it was just unbelievable. It was dark and dirty, and it was more polluted in Edmonton, Calgary than in Beijing and Delhi. It was like smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day.
It was extraordinary. We were talking about that, weren't we, Chris? A lot.
Yes.
Obviously, the numbers. They're the stats as you've compiled them. Would that rank as your #1 story too for the year, Chris?
No doubt about it. Just to put in perspective, you mentioned about 13,000 square kilometers burned. Prince Edward Island is 5,660, so more than twice the size of Prince Edward Island, almost twice the size of Algonquin Park, and massive Jasper National Park. So more area burned in BC than all of Jasper National Park. That is mind-boggling.
It absolutely was. So come back then,
okay,
David. Hang on tight there for a second, Chris, because I'll get your thoughts too. But as we look at this, these are obviously extreme conditions. These are things that we would experience but rarely.
Exactly.
Now they're commonplace.
Yes.
What are you seeing as far as change, David, and to what do you attribute it?
Well, certainly, I think this year is a good example of the kind of weather that will be normal maybe in decades from now. But this was an exceptional year. It's like, our grandparents' parents wouldn't deal with these kinds. These were unprecedented, rare, and you're right, they were almost commonplace. And I think that you couldn't see a year like this year if it wasn't, by avoiding or by suggesting that climate change wasn't an issue. I think we are a warmer world. We're seeing the impacts of there playing out in our country. It's not something that's foreign. It's not something that is futuristic. It's the here and now, and it's affecting us right here today from a cost point of view, a disruptive point of view. And the evidence is, I think, irrefutable. It's not a murky forecast. This is happening right now. We're not having to wait for it. I think there's clearly an element of what we saw this year in Canada and around the world that clearly is coming out of our tailpipes and smokestacks.
Okay.